The emergency beacon screamed through the Galactic Council's communication networks with the desperation of a dying star. Commander Zephyr's crystalline form trembled as she read the message from the Draknari homeworld for the third time. 3 royal hatchlings, each no bigger than a human child but possessing the destructive potential of a small warship, had vanished without a trace. "How does one lose dragon hatchlings?" she muttered, her voice creating musical chimes that echoed through the command center of the orbital station. The Draknari were an ancient race, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Their young were precious beyond measure, each one capable of living for millennia and growing to the size of a cruiser ship. When 3 royal hatchlings disappeared from the most secure nursery on their home world, every species in the galaxy had reason to panic. The search had been going on for weeks. Hundreds of ships scoured every system within 1,000 light-years. The Draknari Empress herself had emerged from her 1,000-year meditation to personally oversee the hunt. Entire fleets were mobilized. Bounty hunters, mercenaries, and even pirates had been recruited with promises of unimaginable wealth. Yet nothing, not a scale, not a heat signature, not even a whisper of their passage. Commander Zephyr activated her holographic display, showing the search grid. Red zones marked areas already swept clean. Yellow zones indicated ongoing searches. The green zones were shrinking rapidly as more ships joined the effort. At the center of it all, a tiny blue dot marked the last known location of the hatchlings before they vanished. "Commander," her aide, a nervous Chintari with 4 arms that constantly fidgeted, approached with another report. "The Empress has authorized the use of temporal scanners. She's desperate." Temporal scanners were dangerous, forbidden technology that could tear holes in space-time if used incorrectly. The fact that the Draknari were willing to risk such measures spoke to their desperation. "Any word from the human sectors?" Zephyr asked. The aide's large eyes blinked rapidly. "The humans? Why would we involve them? They're barely spacefaring. Most of them still live on their single planet." Zephyr turned all 6 of her optical sensors toward her aide. "Because, Kent, humans have a peculiar talent for finding things that don't want to be found. And lately, they've been showing up in the strangest places." It was true. Despite being one of the youngest species in the galaxy, humans had a disturbing habit of appearing where they shouldn't be. They had somehow established trading posts in sectors that should have been unreachable with their primitive technology. Human explorers kept turning up on planets that had been considered uninhabitable. Most puzzling of all, they seemed to have an uncanny ability to befriend hostile alien species that had been shooting at everyone else for centuries. The Galactic Council had begun keeping quiet files on human activities, not because they were considered a threat, but because their actions defied logical explanation. "Sir, I have Captain Rodriguez of the human vessel Lucky Strike requesting communication," announced the communications officer, a tall, willowy being whose entire head was essentially one large ear. Zephyr felt a chill run through her crystalline structure. "Put him through." The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a middle-aged human male with graying hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with patches that suggested he was some kind of independent cargo hauler. "Commander Zephyr, this is Captain Miguel Rodriguez. I understand you folks are looking for some missing kids." "Captain Rodriguez, this is a restricted military channel. The missing children are classified priority alpha. How did you even—" "Yeah, about that," Rodriguez interrupted, running a hand through his hair. "I think I might have found them." The command center fell silent. Every being present turned toward the hologram of the human captain. "You found them?" Zephyr's voice created a discordant note that made everyone wince. "Well, found might be a strong word. More like they found me. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. I was making a supply run to Kepler 442b, that little agricultural world in the outer rim. Nothing special, just dropping off some farming equipment and picking up grain shipments. Rodriguez paused, and Zephyr could see him struggling with how to explain something. Go on, she urged. Well, I was about 3 days out from Kepler when my ship's sensors started going crazy. Heat signatures all over the place, energy readings that didn't make sense. I figured maybe my systems were having a breakdown, so I pulled into an asteroid field to run diagnostics. The human captain looked directly at Zephyr through the holographic display. That's when I found them. 3 little dragons, each about the size of a large dog, huddled together on a small asteroid. They were scared, cold, and looked like they hadn't eaten in days. Impossible, whispered Kint. Draknari hatchlings can survive in space for months without food. Their internal fire sustains them. Rodriguez shrugged. Maybe so, but these 3 looked pretty rough. Their scales were dull, they weren't breathing fire. And when I approached them, they didn't try to attack or run away. They just looked at me with these big, sad eyes. Zephyr leaned forward. What did you do? What any decent person would do. I brought them aboard my ship. The command center erupted in shocked gasps and chittering sounds from various species. Draknari hatchlings were notoriously aggressive and territorial. They had been known to burn through military containment fields and had once incinerated an entire Vorthan diplomatic vessel that had attempted to rescue them from a damaged transport. They let you approach them? Zephyr asked, incredulous. Not only that, but when I opened my cargo bay and called to them, they came right over. No fear, no aggression. It was like they were waiting for someone to help them. Rodriguez paused again, and this time Zephyr could see something resembling embarrassment cross his features. There's more, isn't there? She said. Yeah. See, my ship doesn't have proper life support for Draknari physiology. I figured they'd be okay in the cargo bay with some heat lamps, but they kept crying. This low, mournful sound that just broke your heart. And I couldn't stand it. So I brought them into the main cabin with me, set up some blankets near the environmental controls where it's warmer, figured they'd sleep there and I'd figure out how to contact someone in the morning. Zephyr waited, sensing there was more to this story. When I woke up the next morning, all 3 of them were sleeping on my chest. The silence in the command center was absolute. Captain Rodriguez, Zephyr said slowly, you're telling me that 3 royal Draknari hatchlings, each of whom could melt through battle armor with their breath, chose to sleep on you? That's about the size of it. And when I tried to move, they just snuggled closer. Made this little purring sound I didn't know dragons could make. Rodriguez looked slightly embarrassed. Look, I know how this sounds. I've been hauling cargo for 15 years, and I've seen some weird stuff, but these little guys seem to think I'm their parent or something. They follow me around the ship, eat whatever I eat, and at night they pile up on me like a bunch of oversized cats. Where are they now? Zephyr asked. Sleeping in my quarters. I had to leave them there to make this call. They didn't want me to go, kept making those sad sounds again. The communications display flickered as another signal interrupted the conversation. The massive, imposing form of Empress Thyrilax appeared, her golden scales gleaming and her eyes burning with barely contained fire. Human, the Empress said, her voice like distant thunder, you have my children. Rodriguez, to his credit, didn't flinch. Yes, ma'am, and they're safe. For weeks we have searched every corner of the galaxy, our greatest warriors. Our most advanced technology, our most powerful allies have all failed to locate them. Yet you, a simple cargo hauler from a primitive species, managed to find them by accident. Sometimes the best way to find something is to stop looking so hard, Rodriguez replied. Maybe they didn't want to be found by warships and hunting parties. Maybe they just wanted someone who would take care of them. The Empress stared at the human for a long moment. You will bring them home immediately. With respect, Your Majesty, I don't think that's what they want. The temperature in the command center seemed to drop several degrees as the Empress's eyes narrowed. Explain. They're scared, Rodriguez said simply. I don't know what happened to them or how they ended up on that asteroid, but something spooked them bad. Every time I mention taking them somewhere else, they get agitated. They want to stay with me. They are children, the Empress growled. They do not understand what is best for them. Maybe not, Rodriguez agreed, but they understand what makes them feel safe. And right now, that's my ship and my protection. Zephyr watched this exchange with fascination. In her 300 years of service, she had never seen anyone speak to the Draknari Empress with such casual directness. Most beings prostrated themselves and spoke in formal, flowery language when addressing her. You would dare to keep my children from me? The Empress asked, her voice rising. No, ma'am. I'm saying maybe there's a better way to handle this. These little ones have been through something traumatic. Forcing them into another stressful situation might not be the best approach. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Look, I'm not trying to cause problems. I just want what's best for them. If you want them back, you're going to have to convince them, not me. The human captain looked tired, but his voice remained steady. They're sleeping on my chest because they trust me. They feel safe with me. Maybe instead of demanding I hand them over, you could help me figure out why they ran away in the first place. The Empress was quiet for such a long time that Zephyr began to worry the communication had been severed. Finally, the ancient dragon spoke. You would help us understand what happened to them? I'd do whatever it takes to help those kids, Rodriguez said without hesitation. They've been through enough. Another long pause. Very well, human, we will come to you. But know this, if any harm has come to my children, your entire species will burn. Understood, Rodriguez replied calmly. But you might want to come quietly. No big ships, no armies, just you and maybe a couple of advisors. These little ones spook easy. The Empress's expression was unreadable. You dare to dictate terms to me? I'm asking you to consider what's best for your children, Rodriguez corrected. They've been missing for weeks. They're scared and confused. The last thing they need is more chaos and intimidation. Zephyr found herself holding her breath, waiting for the Empress's response. This human was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. Your coordinates, the Empress said finally. Rodriguez rattled off a series of numbers. I'll be waiting. And Your Majesty, bring some of their favorite foods. I've been feeding them synthesized protein, but I don't think that's what they're used to. The communication ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Sir, Kent whispered, should we alert the fleet? Zephyr considered this. The smart move would be to have ships standing by in case this went badly. But something about the human captain's demeanor suggested that would be exactly the wrong approach. No, she said finally. We wait. And we see if a simple human cargo hauler can succeed where the entire galaxy has failed. As her crew dispersed to monitor the situation, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness something unprecedented. In all her years of service, she had never encountered a situation quite like this one. 3 royal dragon hatchlings, sleeping peacefully on the chest of a human freighter captain who treated them like lost puppies rather than instruments of mass destruction. Perhaps there was more to humanity than anyone had realized. Captain Rodriguez checked his chronometer for the 10th time in as many minutes. The Empress would arrive within the hour, and he could sense the growing anxiety from his 3 small passengers. The dragon hatchlings had been restless all morning, pacing around his quarters and making soft, worried sounds whenever they looked out the viewport. Easy there, little ones, he murmured, kneeling down to where they had gathered near his bunk. I know you're scared, but everything's going to be okay. The largest of the three, whom Rodriguez had mentally named Ember due to her tendency to glow when excited, pressed her warm snout against his palm. Her golden scales were finally beginning to regain their luster after days of proper feeding and care. The second hatchling, smaller but more aggressive, had been dubbed Spark for his habit of shooting tiny jets of flame when startled. The third and smallest, with scales that shimmered between blue and silver, seemed to be the group's lookout and had earned the name Scout. All three had been traumatized when he found them, but over the past few days they had begun to show their natural personalities. Ember was protective and nurturing, often curling around the other two when they slept. Spark was curious and mischievous, constantly exploring every corner of the ship and getting into Rodriguez's supplies. Scout was cautious and observant, always the first to notice changes in the ship's environment or Rodriguez's mood. Right now, all three were displaying clear signs of distress. Their scales had dulled slightly, their internal fires were burning low, and they kept making soft, whimpering sounds that tugged at Rodriguez's heart. "I know," he said softly, settling down on the floor with them. "You don't want to leave, but your family is worried sick about you. They love you and want you safe." Ember looked up at him with large, intelligent eyes that seemed far too old for her small form. She made a low, rumbling sound that Rodriguez had learned was their way of expressing disagreement. "I get it," he continued, gently stroking her head. "You're scared something bad will happen if you go back. But maybe if you tell your mom what scared you in the first place, she can make sure it doesn't happen again." The truth was, Rodriguez was dreading the arrival of the Empress almost as much as his small charges were. He had done his research during their journey, learning everything he could about Draknari culture and customs. The more he learned, the more he realized he was in way over his head. Draknari hatchlings were considered sacred. They were raised in carefully controlled environments by specially trained caretakers who spent decades learning the proper protocols. The fact that 3 royal hatchlings had been sleeping on his chest for the past week would be seen as either miraculous or blasphemous, depending on who was doing the judging. His ship's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming vessel. Rodriguez's heart rate increased as he watched a sleek, elegant ship that was somehow both beautiful and terrifying approach his position. Unlike the massive warships he had expected, this vessel was relatively small, designed more for diplomacy than warfare. "This is Empress Thyrilax requesting permission to board," came the voice over the comm. "Permission granted, Your Majesty," Rodriguez replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Docking bay is open." He felt the slight vibration as the Empress's ship connected with his cargo hauler. The 3 hatchlings immediately pressed closer to him, their anxiety palpable. "Okay, team," Rodriguez said, standing up. "Show time. Remember, I'm right here with you." He made his way to the docking bay, the 3 hatchlings following so closely they were practically stepping on his feet. The airlock cycled, and Rodriguez took a deep breath as it opened. The first thing he noticed was the heat. Draknari naturally ran much warmer than humans, and even through the environmental controls, he could feel the temperature increase. The second thing he noticed was the size difference. He had seen images of adult Draknari, but experiencing their presence in person was something else entirely. Empress Thyrilax was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Her scales were a deep, golden color that seemed to generate their own light, and she stood nearly 3 meters tall even in her compact bipedal form. Her eyes were ancient and intelligent, holding depths that suggested she had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. Behind her came 2 advisors, slightly smaller but no less imposing. One wore robes that marked him as a member of their scientific caste, while the other's bearing suggested military training. The moment the 3 hatchlings saw the Empress, they made sounds Rodriguez had never heard before. Not quite crying, not quite singing, but something that conveyed a complex mix of joy, fear, and longing. The Empress stopped short, her massive head turning toward her children. For a moment, her imposing demeanor cracked, revealing the concerned mother beneath. "Pyrrhion, Stellax, Nebula," she said, her voice gentle despite its power. "My children." The hatchlings looked between Rodriguez and their mother, clearly torn between their desire to run to her and their fear of leaving his protection. "It's okay," Rodriguez said quietly, kneeling down beside them. "Go say hello to your mom." Ember, who was apparently Pyrrhion, took a tentative step forward, then looked back at Rodriguez for reassurance. When he nodded encouragingly, she broke into a run, her siblings close behind. The reunion was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. The Empress lowered herself to the deck, allowing her children to climb onto her much larger form. She nuzzled each of them gently, making soft crooning sounds that echoed through the docking bay. But Rodriguez could see that the hatchlings were still tense, still looking back at him as if afraid he might disappear. "Captain Rodriguez," the Empress said, her voice carefully controlled. "We are in your debt." "Just glad I could help, Your Majesty," Rodriguez replied, uncertain of the proper protocol. "They're good kids. Been a pleasure having them aboard." The Empress studied him for a long moment. "Our records indicate that your species has had minimal contact with Draknari. How did you know how to care for them?" Rodriguez shrugged. Common sense, mostly. They were cold, hungry, and scared. Didn't matter what species they were. Kids need food, warmth, and someone who gives a damn about their well-being. "You fed them human food?" "Synthesized proteins mostly, with some mineral supplements I keep for alien passengers. I had to experiment a bit to find combinations they could digest properly." The scientific advisor stepped forward, his expression one of professional curiosity mixed with disbelief. "Draknari hatchlings have extremely specific dietary requirements. Their digestive systems are designed to process certain types of crystalline minerals that provide the base elements for their fire-breathing capabilities. Human food should have made them severely ill. Well, they seem to like the protein bars I gave them, especially the ones with chocolate chips." The advisor's eyes widened. "Chocolate? You gave them chocolate?" "Is that bad?" Rodriguez asked, suddenly worried. "They kept asking for more, and it seemed to make them happy." "Theobromine, one of the active compounds in chocolate, should be toxic to our species," the advisor muttered, pulling out some kind of scanning device. "And yet they appear to be in excellent health." The Empress watched her children, who were now divided between staying near her and returning to Rodriguez's side. "There are other mysteries here as well. How did you locate them when our most advanced sensors could not?" Rodriguez considered this. "Honestly, I think they wanted to be found by someone like me." "Explain." "Look at how they're acting right now. They love you, that's obvious. But they're still scared. Something happened that made them run away, and I don't think it was something external." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've hauled cargo all over the galaxy. I've seen a lot of species, learned a lot about how different cultures raise their young. Sometimes kids act out not because they're bad, but because they need something they're not getting." The Empress's expression grew dangerous. "Are you suggesting that we failed to properly care for them?" "I'm suggesting that maybe they needed something different than what they were getting," Rodriguez said calmly. "These little ones are incredibly smart. They've got personalities, preferences, individual needs. Maybe the traditional way of raising them wasn't working for these particular kids." He gestured toward the hatchlings, who were now actively moving back and forth between him and their mother, unable to choose where they felt safest. "Look at them. They want to be with both of us. They want their family, but they also want whatever it was they found with me." "And what was that?" the military advisor asked, his tone skeptical. Rodriguez thought about this for a moment. "Freedom, maybe? The ability to make their own choices, explore, learn through trial and error? I didn't have a nursery with strict rules and schedules. I just treated them like the intelligent beings they are and let them figure things out for themselves. He knelt down again, and all 3 hatchlings immediately came to him, pressing against his sides. They spent their first night on my ship crying because they missed you, he said to the Empress. But when I offered to take them home right away, they got even more upset. I think they were torn between wanting to be with their family and wanting to be somewhere they felt free to be themselves. The scientific advisor was frantically taking notes. This is unprecedented. Draknari hatchlings have never shown such attachment to other species. Their instincts should drive them to view all non-Draknari as potential threats. Maybe their instincts are evolving, Rodriguez suggested. These 3 sure didn't see me as a threat. If anything, they seemed to recognize that I was trying to help them. The Empress was quiet for a long time, watching her children's behavior. Finally, she spoke. There was an incident, she said slowly. 3 weeks ago, a training exercise that went wrong. None of the children were harmed, but they witnessed something that frightened them greatly. What kind of training exercise? Combat preparation. It is traditional for royal hatchlings to begin learning defensive techniques at their age. We were demonstrating the destructive capabilities they would one day possess. Rodriguez began to understand. You were teaching them to fight, to defend themselves and their people, the military advisor corrected. It is necessary training. But they're kids, Rodriguez said. Kids who maybe weren't ready to learn about destruction and warfare. He looked at the 3 hatchlings who were listening to every word despite their young age. What if they don't want to be weapons? What if they want to be something else? The question hung in the air like a challenge. In all of Draknari history, royal hatchlings were groomed from birth to become mighty warriors and leaders. The possibility that they might choose a different path was revolutionary. The destiny of royal hatchlings is not a matter of choice, the military advisor said stiffly. They have responsibilities to their species. Maybe, Rodriguez said. But forcing them into roles they're not ready for or don't want might be exactly what sent them running in the first place. He stood up, gently encouraging the hatchlings to go back to their mother. Look, I'm not claiming to understand your culture or your traditions, but I do know scared kids when I see them, and these 3 were terrified when I found them. Not of me, not of space, but of something they were trying to get away from. The Empress lowered her great head until she was at eye level with Rodriguez. You speak with great boldness for someone of such a young species. I speak as someone who cares about your children, Rodriguez replied. They're incredible little beings, smart, loyal, curious, and full of potential. Whatever path they end up choosing, they deserve the chance to choose it themselves. The docking bay fell silent, except for the soft sounds the hatchlings were making as they nuzzled against both Rodriguez and their mother. There is wisdom in your words, the Empress said finally. Perhaps we have been so focused on preparing them for what we believed they should become that we forgot to ask what they wished to become. She gently gathered her children closer, but Rodriguez noticed that she no longer seemed in a hurry to leave with them. Captain Rodriguez, she said formally, I have a proposition for you. The proposition was unlike anything Rodriguez had ever imagined. As he sat in his cramped cargo ship's main cabin, surrounded by some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, he struggled to process what the Empress was suggesting. You want me to what? He asked, certain he had misunderstood. Become their cultural exchange guardian, the Empress repeated patiently. For 1 standard galactic year, you would travel with them, exposing them to different worlds, different species, different ways of life. In return, they would learn that the galaxy contains more possibilities than they ever imagined. The scientific advisor, who had introduced himself as Scholar Vex, looked up from his data pad, where he had been furiously recording the hatchlings' behavior. The idea has precedent in our ancient history, he explained. Before we became a purely warrior culture, young dragons would spend time with other species to learn diplomacy and cultural understanding. The practice was abandoned centuries ago when we became more isolationist. But why me? Rodriguez asked. I'm nobody special, just a cargo hauler trying to make a living. You are someone my children trust, the Empress said simply. In 3 weeks of searching by our finest warriors and most skilled trackers, we could not locate them. You found them in 3 days. More importantly, they chose you. She gestured toward the 3 hatchlings, who had arranged themselves in their now familiar positions around Rodriguez's chair. Pyrion had claimed his left side, Stellax was curled up at his feet, and Nebula was perched on the arm of his chair, her small claws carefully positioned to avoid damaging the worn fabric. Furthermore, she continued, your approach to their care has yielded remarkable results. In the few days they have been with you, they have shown more growth and contentment than in weeks of traditional care. General Korath, the military advisor, looked less convinced. With respect, Empress, this human has no training in dragon care, no understanding of our security protocols, and no experience in cross-cultural education. True, the Empress acknowledged. But he has something our traditional methods lack, the ability to treat them as individuals rather than products of their breeding. Rodriguez found himself looking down at the 3 small faces gazing up at him trustingly. In just a few days, these creatures had become important to him in a way he hadn't expected. The thought of never seeing them again left an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest. What would this actually involve? He asked. Scholar Vex consulted his notes. We would equip your vessel with proper life support for extended Draknari habitation. You would receive cultural briefings for each world you visit. Most importantly, you would have complete autonomy in choosing destinations and experiences. Within reason, General Korath added firmly. Of course, the Empress said smoothly. No war zones, no dangerous sectors, no species with hostile intentions toward dragons. But beyond those constraints, the choice would be yours. Rodriguez considered this. And after the year is up? The hatchlings would return home to begin their formal education, but they would do so with a broader understanding of the galaxy and their place in it. Perhaps they would still choose the path of warriors. Perhaps they would choose something else entirely. The revolutionary nature of this statement was not lost on anyone present. The idea that royal Draknari hatchlings might choose careers other than military or political leadership was unprecedented. There would be other benefits, Scholar Vex added. Your vessel would be upgraded with Draknari technology. You would receive full diplomatic immunity throughout the galaxy. And upon successful completion of the exchange, you would be granted honorary membership in the Draknari Trade Consortium. Rodriguez whistled softly. Trade Consortium membership would mean access to shipping routes and cargo contracts that could set him up for life. But as he looked at the 3 small dragons, he realized that wasn't what was motivating his decision. What do you 3 think? He asked the hatchlings. Want to go on an adventure? Pyrion immediately began making excited chirping sounds. Stellax shot a small puff of flame that Rodriguez had learned was their equivalent of an enthusiastic yes. Nebula, ever the cautious one, tilted her head thoughtfully before nodding once. I think that's a yes, Rodriguez said, smiling despite his nervousness. There would be conditions, General Korath warned. Regular check-ins with our monitoring stations. Immediate recall if any danger is detected. And absolutely no deviation from approved flight plans without prior authorization. Fair enough, Rodriguez agreed. The Empress studied him carefully. You understand the responsibility you would be accepting? These are not merely alien children. They are the future of the Draknari Empire. Their experiences during this formative period could shape the direction of our entire civilization. The weight of her words settled over Rodriguez like a heavy blanket. He was being asked to help raise the future leaders of one of the galaxy's most powerful species. The decisions he made, the places he took them, the lessons he taught them, could affect billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. No pressure, he muttered. But then Pyrian nuzzled against his hand, and Stellax made that contented purring sound, and Nebula gently touched his arm with her snout. These weren't future emperors or generals in his mind. They were just three scared kids who had chosen to trust him. "Okay," he said finally, "let's do it." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The Empress's ship docked with a massive engineering vessel that had apparently been standing by just outside sensor range. Rodriguez watched in amazement as teams of technicians swarmed over his humble cargo hauler, installing equipment that probably cost more than his ship's original value. The life support system was completely overhauled to accommodate Draknari physiology. His tiny galley was expanded and equipped with food synthesizers capable of producing proper dragon nutrition. Most impressively, his cramped quarters were redesigned to include a communal sleeping area where the hatchlings could rest comfortably. The modifications include defensive systems, General Korath explained as they toured the upgraded vessel. Nothing that violates galactic peace treaties, but enough to discourage pirates or other opportunists who might see you as a target. Scholar Vex handed Rodriguez a data pad loaded with cultural information about dozens of species and worlds. This will help you understand what experiences might be most beneficial for their development. I particularly recommend starting with the peaceful gardens of Xerion Prime. The inhabitants there have developed remarkable conflict resolution techniques that could be valuable for future Draknari leaders to understand. As the technical work neared completion, the Empress drew Rodriguez aside for a private conversation. "I want you to understand something," she said, her voice low and intense. "What you accomplished in finding my children was not just about being in the right place at the right time. You succeeded where others failed because you approached them without preconceptions." She paused, her ancient eyes studying his face. "Our species is at a crossroads. For too long we have seen strength only in terms of military power. But the galaxy is changing. Perhaps it is time for dragons to change as well." "You really think 3 kids can change an entire civilization?" Rodriguez asked. "I think 3 kids raised with the understanding that they have choices can grow into adults who offer those same choices to others," she replied. "You have already given them something no Draknari hatchling has ever had. The experience of being valued for who they are, rather than what they are expected to become." Rodriguez felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again, but this time it felt different. Less like a burden, and more like an opportunity. "I won't let you down," he promised. "I am not concerned about disappointing me," the Empress said. "I am concerned about you disappointing them. They have chosen you, Captain Rodriguez. Do not make them regret that choice." As the engineering teams finished their work and prepared to depart, Rodriguez found himself standing in his transformed ship with 3 young dragons who were looking at him with expressions of excitement and trust. "Well, team," he said, settling into his captain's chair, "where should we go first?" Nebula immediately rushed to the navigation console, her small claws surprisingly adept at operating the new interface. Images of dozens of worlds flashed across the display as she scrolled through their options. "The singing crystals of Melodia?" Rodriguez suggested, reading from Scholar Vex's recommendations. "Supposed to be one of the most beautiful sights in the galaxy." Stellax made an excited sound and pointed at an image of a world covered in massive crystalline formations that rang like musical instruments when the wind passed through them. "Melodia it is," Rodriguez said, beginning the startup sequence. "Everyone strap in. Next stop, Musical Mountains." As his ship departed the rendezvous point, Rodriguez reflected on how drastically his life had changed in just a few short days. He had started the week as a simple cargo hauler making routine deliveries. Now he was essentially the adoptive father of 3 dragon princes, embarking on a year-long journey that could reshape galactic politics. But as he listened to the excited chatter of his young passengers as they discussed what they might find on Melodia, he realized he had never felt more purpose in his work. These weren't just passengers or cargo. They were his responsibility, his students, and increasingly, his family. "Captain Rodriguez?" Pirion's voice was soft and uncertain. "What's up, kiddo? Will you really stay with us for the whole year, even when we're difficult or scared or make mistakes?" Rodriguez looked back at her, seeing both the regal bearing of her royal heritage and the vulnerable child beneath it. "Pirion, you're stuck with me whether you like it or not. That's what family does. We stick together through the good times and the bad times." "Family?" Stellax asked, tilting his head. "That's right. We're a family now. A weird, interspecies, traveling family. And families take care of each other." Nebula made a soft, contented sound and curled up in the co-pilot's seat. "I like being family." As Rodriguez engaged the hyperdrive and watched the stars blur into lines outside his viewport, he smiled. Maybe he didn't know what challenges the next year would bring. Maybe he wasn't qualified for this responsibility. Maybe the Empress was wrong to trust him with something so important. But for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. "Next stop, Melodia," he announced. "Let's go see what the galaxy has to teach us." Behind him, 3 young dragons settled in for the journey, safe in the knowledge that they had found someone who would let them discover who they were meant to become, rather than telling them who they had to be. And in the depths of space, a simple human cargo hauler began one of the most important educational journeys in galactic history. Armed with nothing more than common sense, genuine care, and the revolutionary idea that sometimes the best way to raise future leaders is to first let them be children.